Okay, so we're going to start today with exercise 207, which is essentially exercise 206 and 207 together because of last class, Rhino not working. And I don't want you guys to end up being behind, so I wanted to go ahead and try to cram it all into one day. If we find that it ends up being too overwhelming when we get to the second half today, I might cut back on what you actually have to post, but I don't want to just leave it off altogether because I don't want to be behind. So what I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier is I'm going to break the lecture into two parts. I'll do the first part of the lecture now. Then you guys will have time to work for 45 minutes or an hour or so. And then I'll come back and do the second half of the lecture. And you'll have another 45 minutes or an hour to finish up that section. So we'll make adjustments as it goes along. I'm not quite sure how it'll play out. You'll have a little bit less time to play around with stuff. But it'll be okay, and it'll certainly still get you there. I know some of you already did exercise 206, where you went ahead and you built it, and you feel like, okay, I got this. I don't need to listen to this part of the demo. I don't mind if you guys go have lunch or whatever and come back. I would bet that by the time I'm done talking and you guys have time to work, it's going to be about 12:45-ish when I start the second lecture. So between 12:45 and 1 will probably be when I start the second lecture. So just keep that in the back of your head if you end up. If you haven't done it, that's perfectly okay. We're going to go through the first part right now. The thing about this is, just like I did with exercise 205, this is a very scripted exercise. I'm telling you a specific set of steps. I'm having you work through that specific set of steps because I want you to learn certain commands. And so we're going to spend the time going through those steps and learning those commands. And so I'm going to start by opening up Rhino. And luckily today it's actually going to open for me. That's a good thing. And once it's kind of loading here, I'm going to go to New, and I'm going to say Large Object Inches, which is my default template that I use every time. And there's Large Objects Inches. That's gone ahead and loaded for me. I'm going to make sure that my toolbar is set over here at Standard. I'm going to turn on my Object Snap, my O Snap down at the bottom. I'm going to turn on End, Mid, and Perp as my three defaults. And once I have those three defaults on, I'm also going to double check down here that it says inches, which it does. That's the unit that I want to be in before I actually start drawing anything. So from here, we're going to go ahead and draw the shape right next to step 1. It's a 13-inch line with a 2-inch by 2-inch arc, or 2-inch radius arc. And so we need to start by creating that in the first place. There are, of course, many ways of drawing the arc, drawing the line, and creating the shape. I'm going to go ahead and do it the way I would do it. It doesn't mean it's the right way or the wrong way. If we come down here on the left side, you see that there's a variety of tools that will let us draw arcs. If I click on the arc tool, there's also a bunch of different arcs that I can pick from. The first one here is arc, center, start, and angle. So if I did that one, for example, and I wanted to have my arc start right there at that point and come up here, it's asking me first for the center of the arc. So in that case, I would need to know where the center would be. It would be 2 inches over on the, if this were 0, 0, this would be a point called 2, 0, because it would be 2 inches over. So I could start by saying 2, 0, and then hitting enter. Then it says the start of the arc, that would be at 0, 0. And the end of the arc, if I turned on ortho, would be really easy because it's at 90. And I could draw it that way. This is convenient because it's right at the origin, so doing those coordinates is not that hard. There are, however, other options available in the arc tools. So I could, for example, do the start, the end, and the radius, for example, in which case I could choose, I'll do it going the opposite way. I could choose 0, 0 as my start. I could do at -2, -2 for my end, and then my direction, sorry, it should have been +2. And then this would be, my radius would be 2. It's just different ways of creating the arc to begin with. It doesn't matter how you do it, it's just the act of actually doing it. So I have my arc there. The next thing I need is a 13-inch long line. So I'll go back to my polyline tool. Because my snaps are on, I snap right to the end of this line, and I'll draw a line that is 13 inches long. So I've just done a direction and a length. There it is. I'll hit enter. And the last piece was that arc again. So we'll do the center start, so I'll start here and I'll come down by 2 inches to give me the center. There's the start, there's the end, and now I have that. So I have this arc plus the line segment that's 13 inches long, plus that line segment there. That's the shape that I was asking you guys to create in step 1 of part 1. I'm going to go ahead and join those together. So I'll select them all, I'll go to the Edit menu, and then I'll select Join, or press Ctrl-J. That joins them all together so they become one continuous polyline. At this point, I'm going to double-click on the perspective view to make that the large view. And I'm going to use my Rotate 3D to get this little arc to stand up in the 3rd dimension. So I'll go ahead and select it right there. And I'll go up to my Transform tools, and I'll go to Rotate 3D. My rotation axis is going to be right along the x-axis here. So the start would be right there. The end would be right there. My angle or first reference point would be going up the y-axis until that stands straight up. And again, I have ortho on, so it makes it rather easy to get that to stand up. So I've drawn it flat first, and then I've done Rotate 3D to get that piece to stand up in the 3rd dimension. So it looks like I did step 2 and step 3 out of order. I joined them afterwards on the handout. I joined them before I did the rotate. Doesn't make any difference which way I do it. But now it's time to go ahead and draw a circle at one end of the line. And that circle should be a 1/2 inch in diameter, not in radius. So I'll come over here to the Circle tool. It's going to ask me for the center of the circle. We'll start right there at the center. And by default, it's asking for the radius. I want to pick a diameter, so I'm going to click on diameter, and I want that to be 0.5. I put the inches in. I don't have to. My default units are in inches. It's habit for me sometimes to put it in, so I do it. What? No, it's 0.5. 0.5. Yeah, you can see it on the little drawing. It's small, but it's there. 0.5. OK, so I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see this a little bit better. And what I'd like to do, and the reason that I created this geometry in the first place, is I want like a tube or a pipe. I want a tube or a pipe to have the cross section of this circle, but to follow this curve. And I can do that in Rhino using a command called a sweep. Basically what a sweep is give me a cross section and make that cross section go along the length of a curve. So I'll go ahead and do a sweep 1, which is available under Surface Sweep 1 Rail, or you could type in Sweep 1. First thing it asks for is to select the rail. The rail is the curve that it's following. So that's my rail. Select cross-section curves. That's my cross-section curve. When I'm done, I'll hit Enter. It's going to ask me where the seam should be. That's fine. The seam can go there. And I'll go ahead and hit Enter one more time. And it builds for me basically a pipe that follows along in that shape. Let me switch over into shaded mode so you can see it. And it's built that pipe for me. Now, I'm not limited to having to have this as my cross-sectional curve. It is ultimately what I'm going to do. But I could, for example, have a completely different shape as my cross-sectional curve. Same thing, I could go to Sweep. Sorry, it's under Surface, Sweep 1 Rail. There's my rail. There's my cross-sectional curve. And I could build that shape. So I have a lot of flexibility in what I'm creating out of this. This is just a method to create these kinds of shapes. Furthermore, all right, let me show you some other examples. So let's say, let me turn off ortho here for a second. Let's say I had that curve. And let's say that I decided that some of these points needed to be up and down in space a little bit. So let's pull those up a little bit. Oops. Why are they not? You gotta love it when stuff doesn't work the way you want it to, right? Let's try it this way. There you go. That's going to work for me. So all I did was I made this curve go up and down in space. I could take a shape, say something like this. Let me rotate it 3D so that it's not. How about rotate 3D? And I could do a sweep along this. So I could say, let's do a sweep 1. There's my rail, there's my cross-sectional curve, and build me essentially a path that follows along. There's a little bit of an issue there. I've got a kink because my curve got a little bit too tight to my cross-section, but you guys get the idea of what it's doing. There are some other options built in that may work better. So on that sweep 1, rail, cross-sectional curve, when I get to these options, I've been using freeform. You can also use roadlike top, which sometimes gives you better results for this kind of a scenario where I'm trying to keep the top level. It doesn't stick up as much. It's not going to bank the turns as much. It's going to be more like a road. So we've got options there. The other thing that I can do is I can create another curve. Let me just use the same curve here. All right, so there's another curve. I just copied the curve, essentially. Let me move this curve so that it lines up like that. And when I go to sweep this now, instead of sweeping one rail, I'm going to sweep both rails. So I'll say sweep 2, or sweep 2 rails. It's going to ask me for the first rail, the second rail, and then the cross-section curve. And what this does is it changes when the rails get closer together. The cross-section gets smaller. When they get further apart, the cross-section gets bigger. So it's just another way of making something. Okay? So I wanted to introduce today the concept of these sweeps. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of that. That was just me playing around. Let's come back to my original piece here and do that sweep one more time. It's a sweep one rail. So I'll go up to Surface, sweep one rail, select my rail. That's my rail. Select my cross-section curve. That's my cross-section curve. I'll go ahead and hit Enter. I'll hit Enter one more time. I don't want it to be road-like top anymore. I want it to be freeform. And we'll go ahead and say OK. And there is my tube that represents this first piece that I'm working on building. So there it is. So I'm going to move on. And the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here. And I can do this in a variety of ways. And I'll show you each way. I can start with a circle. I'm going to snap to the center right there. And again, this is in diameter. This is 1.5 inches. There it is. So I've given myself a 1.5 inch diameter. And I'm going to extrude that curve. I'll go into my curve, or excuse me, surface, extrude curve straight. I want to make sure that the extrusion is set to solid. So it should be yes. And I'm going to specify that this is negative 0.25 inches, I think. Yep. And I'm specifying negative 0.25, so it's going down, which is the important part. There it is. Now, I could also, instead, use one of my primitives. I could do this cylinder primitive. There's nothing wrong with doing it. It's just a different strategy. So I'll do that at this end. There it is. This time it's asking for a radius. I can cut that in half in my head, or I could switch to diameter and say, yeah, this needs to be 1.5 inches. There it is. And it's going to be negative 0.25 inches thick. So I've created these buttons on either side. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this going down. So I'm going to go up to Transform, and and I'm going to go to copy, but I'm not going to copy it in a traditional sense. So right now, if I were to click on it, it's going to go in the X and Y direction. I want it to go in the vertical direction. I want it to go down. So when I initiate the copy command, I'm going to choose vertical yes. So now we're going vertical. And I'm going to say this is going to go down by negative 0.75 inches, which essentially means that there's going to be a ½ inch between these two, and each of these is going to be a ¼ inch. So that's why I put it down by negative 0.75. So one more time with this piece, I'll go up to transform. I'm going to go to copy. There's my object. I'll hit enter. Point to copy from. I want it to be vertical, so I click vertical first. I'll click on somewhere on the object. There it is. And we'll say negative 0.75 inches. And I'll hit enter to finish, and there it is. So I've created these little buttons on either end. Ultimately, what we're creating, by the way, is a glass spider clamp. If you did a Google image search, we're creating something like this. And of course, it didn't load. We can see it there. If you keep going, yeah, it's something like this. There you go. That one's going to show up a little bigger. We're building something along these lines, just in terms of visually understanding what it is that we're working on. OK, so I've created that bar. I've created these two little buttons. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate this whole thing 45 degrees, so that instead of being in line this way, it's going to be going at an X right here. So I'll take all of it, and I'm going to go to my rotate. This is not rotate 3D. This is just regular rotate. I'll go to transform and then rotate. I'm going to start right there at 0.00, and I'm going to rotate. I could turn on ortho here, there, and I need to specify that this needs to be halfway. So in that case, this is 90 degrees. It would be 45, so I can type in 45 and hit enter, and it's going to rotate it at exactly 45 degrees. Now I've set this thing up so that it lands right on a 1 foot square. So it's looking exactly as it should. So the next thing that I need, though, is I need the second half of this. I need to take this same piece and make a copy of it and put it there. So this is where efficiencies start to come into play. And so essentially what I would need to do is I could take this, I could copy it, I could move it over here, I could take this new piece and I could rotate it. I'll rotate around the center. And there it is in that direction. And then I could move it back to right there to create this. But there's a more efficient way of doing it. And the more experience you get in Rhino, the faster you'll be at these kinds of things. So if I were doing it personally, I would take this original, and I'd go up to transform copy, or I would type copy. And one of the options is in place. So I'll click on in place. I didn't do anything other than click on in place. My selection is still active, so I can immediately go to rotate. And I can rotate the piece that's still selected by 90. Oops, not 902, 90. And then I get my second piece. So it was far more efficient in terms of how I built it, because I copied in place. And for me, it would be copy, enter, I, enter, and then rotate, enter, and then I'd click and do the rotate. Yeah?
Mine isn't like staying selected after copying.
You must have hit enter one extra time or something. It should stay selected after the copy. But I can come and have a look when you do it. So now I've created that X that's on the bottom. And we're down here at step 9. For step 10 going forward, I'm going to ask you to use the same strategies to create the spire, essentially, for lack of a better term, that's going to go up. I'm going to do it live for you, but by the time you got there, you're probably behind. You haven't done it yet. it's okay. This is meant to be a little bit of a test for you. So you don't feel like you have to follow along this part, but I will show you how I go about doing it. So using the same set of commands, I need to build the rod that sticks straight up from here. And so to do that, I'll go ahead and start with a line. And I can start really pretty much anywhere. And I'll go up, and I need to flip this over to see the drawing. And the overall height is 2 feet. So I'll go ahead and say this is 2 feet. And there it is. I'll hit enter. Then I need a circle. And the diameter here is 0.5. There it is. I'm going to rotate 3D to fold this up into space, like that. Then I can do a sweep, 1, rail, cross-section, enter, enter, and there's my cylinder. Now, truth be told, I could come in and use the standard primitives and do the cylinder that way too. It's not a right or a wrong answer to doing it that way. So now that I have the rod, I need to do the little donut on the end. And so once again, under the standard primitives, there is a donut that you could do, but I'm going to do it with a sweep so that we emphasize the sweep, just different strategies. So in this case, I'll start with 2 curves. First one is the inner diameter. This would be 3/8 of an inch. Notice that it's smaller than the 1/2 inch, so it's meant to be a little bit smaller. So that one's 3/8. Then the outer one, in all honesty, I don't remember what it is. Inch and 3/4. 1.75, and again, these are all in diameter. So there's my 1.75. So I have this inner one, and I have this outer one. I can do a circle, not a center and then a radius, but instead the diameter circle right here. And I can go from one side out to that side. So you see how I end up with these 3 circles? I'm going to do a rotate 3D on this circle so that it goes up like that. And I'm going to sweep this circle around one or the other of these curves. I could do a sweep too. I don't need to. One was just fine. So I'll go ahead and do a surface, sweep 1 rail. Sorry. Surface, sweep 1 rail. There's my rail, there's my cross-section curve, and I'll go ahead and hit enter, and then enter. There is a good point here, and that is that your curve doesn't have to be adjacent to the rail. It doesn't have to touch the rail. So I could, for example, have this out here. I could do a sweep 1 with this is my rail, this is my cross-section curve, and it would build it like that. So it's just following along the same distance apart. That wasn't obviously what I wanted to do. I was just using that as an example. So let me come back here one more time. Sweep 1. Sorry, sweep 1. Rail, cross-section, enter, enter, and there's my little donut. Okay, pretty good. There's some baggage here. My rod extends past my donut. I need to kind of clarify that a little bit. So I can use a trim. I'll use my donut as a trim. I'll type trim. And I need to select that piece and that piece. There is still inside, if I switched my view into a ghosted view, we can see that I still have some of this rod going through. I could trim it further in the ghosted view by using trim and then coming in here and clicking on that piece. So now I don't have that anymore either. It doesn't really matter for our purposes, but I could also use this as a trim and trim that little surface out. So technically speaking, if I were to zoom in, that's hollow now. Doesn't matter, but I could do it. OK, so now I have the donut on top. I have the rod. We need to position this on top of this X. So overall height was 2 feet from there to there. So I need to know where the position, where the center of this is down on the ground. So let's go ahead and just draw a line for ourselves. We know where this is. This is 0, 0. We also know where the other end is, right there. So guess what? The center, the midpoint of this line is going to be right in line with where I want my rod to go. So let's rotate this rod 3D. I'll select it, rotate 3D. My axis of rotation will be along the bottom here. My first reference point will be along the length of the rod, and we'll stand it up. And then I'll go ahead and move this over to the midpoint of that line right there. And when I do that, it should match up perfectly on top of the little spiders, which it does. This is still a little bit long, so I need to do some more trimming. It might help to switch into shaded mode to see it a little bit better. And I'll go ahead and do some more trimming. So I'll pick this, and I'll type trim. And we need to get rid of that bottom piece there, like that. If I switched into my ghosted mode, we'd see that there's still some internal stuff in the way. I could go through and I could get rid of that internal stuff if I wanted to. But again, once you're inside the shape, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to be 3D printing this object, so the cleanliness of the object is not quite as critical as it would otherwise be if we were going to 3D print the object. So there we go. I've trimmed that object all the way back to having just this top where it meets. So now that I've created this part of it, I need a couple more things. One, I need a sheet of glass, and two, I need the cable that's going to go from this. Now, I should also point out that typically in this, when they're using this as a structural system for a big wall of glass, the cables have to go in both directions. You can't just go in one direction because you have to be able to handle the load going the opposite direction too. So this is not really a real technical wall. It wouldn't actually work, but that's okay. It's in the computer. There's no gravity. We're not worried about it. There's no earthquakes, no gravity. We can make it work. So I'm going to go ahead and draw two things. One will be the rod that goes up here, and the second will be the pane of glass, or actually I'll start with the pane of glass. The pane of glass is really easy. I'm going to use the box corner-to-corner tool. We're going to start at point 0, 0, which is right here, and my sheet of glass is going to be 4 feet, by 6 feet. So it's simply at 4 feet, 6 feet. That gives me my sheet of glass. And my thickness is going to be -1/2 inch, or I could snap to this lower button. So it would be -0.5 inches. And there it is. It looks like when I did it, I'm not quite low enough. Hold on one second. Let me show you this. When I created it, it was at 0, 0. It needs to go down by another 1/2 inch. So let me go ahead and go to Transform, Move, Vertical. This is going to be -0.25 inches. And there we go. Now it's in its correct position. So I also need the little rod that goes up from here. So I could do that using a sweep, or I could do that using one of the cylinder tools. Either way is fine. I'll go ahead and do it using a sweep. I'll start right there. I need a line that is 6 feet long. And yes, I'm aware that that line is longer than the pane of glass, but it's going to continue and meet up with this when we stack them together and make a wall out of them later on. Okay, so I have that. I need to do a sweep on that. So I'll select the little curve here, or excuse me, let me go to Sweep 1, Surface, Sweep 1 Rail. There's my rail. There's my curve. I'll hit Enter and Enter. Okay, and that gives me the cable that's part of this. Question?
How long did you say to make the table?
6 feet. 6 feet. So now the last piece of this is to actually rotate this up into the third dimension. So I'll take the whole thing here, and I'm going to go to Transform, Rotate 3D. And we'll start with my sheet of glass. And we'll go across the sheet of glass. We'll go up vertically on the sheet of glass. And then we'll stand it up so that it's actually standing up like that. For cleanliness purposes, I'm also going to move the glass to be at 0, 0, 0. So that point of the glass will be at 0, 0, 0. And I'll hit enter. It just moves it up ever so slightly. And that gives me the glass with the clamp. So this is the first thing that you're trying to create. Let me just double check. Good. And then we need to assign it some materials and do a little test render so we can prove that it worked. So let me go ahead and divide this out using my layers. So let's do a main layer, and we'll call this curtain wall. We'll do a sublayer that is glass. And we'll do a sublayer that is clamp. I'll take the glass and put it on the glass layer. So I'll right click and say change object layer. There it is. I'll take the clamp, which is right here, and put it on the clamp layer, change object layer. And now I need to go ahead and assign some materials to this. So I don't have my V-Ray toolbars loaded, so let me go ahead and load those. I'll go to Tools, Toolbar Layout. And once I'm here, I'll go to the File menu and choose Open. And on my flash drive, I should have saved by now my V-Ray toolbars. There they are. And I can go ahead and load those into place. Now I have my V-Ray toolbars loaded. Let's start with the material editor and load two materials. The first material, I could load glass, but I don't have a good environment for glass. So that's a little bit problematic. I'll make a fake glass. So I'll go ahead and create material, and I'll do standard. And we'll change the color to be kind of a blue. And we'll change the transparency to be a little bit transparent. And when we see it, it should look a little glass-like. If I wanted to make it a little bit more realistic, I could create layer reflection. That would make it a little bit shiny. I can do that if I wanted. And we'll call this glass. And then we'll apply the glass layer on the glass, the glass material on the glass layer. So I'll apply material to layer, not to selection. And it's going to go on glass. And then I need one more. I need some like metal or something for the spider clamp. So let's go ahead and load material. And I'll go to my V-Ray materials. And we'll go into metal. And I'll just pick a matte aluminum. If I preview it, it should look like aluminum. Good. I'll right click and say apply material to layer. And it's going to go onto the clamp layer as well. So I have those two things ready. If I were to render it right now, my background is black. So I'd see that, yes, I do have something there, but it's not really the most attractive rendering in the to get started with. For today's purposes, because we're doubling up on lectures and whatever, the simplest solution, rather than setting up a whole scene, would be to go into my V-Ray options, go to my environment, and change the background color from black to white. And then I can go ahead and do a render. And I'll see my object. I'm not worried about the light. I'm not worried about the environment or anything for this because we have so much more to do today. So what I want you to do now is I want you to start working. I'll give you 45 minutes or so to work on this and get this finished. Then I'll come back and I'll re-lecture on the next half, the next sheet that's in the handout, which is a bunch of V-Ray stuff. And then you'll have some time to work on the V-Ray stuff from there. So hang tight for a little bit. Bear with me. I know it's a lot to take in today, but get this made in the next 45 minutes or so. If we do that in 45 minutes, we'll start back up at, let's start back up at 12:35. I'll start the next lecture. Okay? That should give you a good amount of time to finish this one up. Don't worry about making any posts just yet. We'll make the posts at the end.
Will we post both assignments as like both of them will be as 207?
As 207, exactly. Exactly. Okay, so I'm a few minutes late, but we're going to continue on with the second half of exercise 207. this is where we start to work in V-Ray for a little bit. And this is, again, so that we don't get behind because of last class. So I apologize that we have to kind of double down. If you're not quite done with the little spider clamp, that's OK. Get as far as you can today. Post what you've gotten done, and you'll still get credit for it. I know we're kind of cramming everything together, and unfortunately, that's the way it has to be. So the second part of what we're going to talk about today is called texture mapping on objects. And you guys have had a little bit of experience in V-Ray. Maybe when you worked with your house file after we started doing that first round of materials, you applied, say, a brick texture to your house, and you realized that it looked really funny. It was too big, it wasn't the right scale, or whatever. Texture mapping is how V-Ray controls what an object looks like, how the texture is applied to an object, and consequently what it looks like. So I'm going to walk through today for you guys some of this basic texture mapping. And texture mapping is an art. It takes time to get it right, especially when objects aren't easy objects. But like I said, I'll go through and I'll walk you through kind of the basics of texture mapping so that we can start to get those materials looking correct at the correct scale, etc. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to create several different objects for me. This time it's going to be a little bit more specific. I'm going to start with a kind of a wall rectangle object. So I'll use my box corner to corner tool here, and somewhere in space I'm going to do a wall that is at 12 feet, 1 foot. And we'll do it 8 feet tall, like that. In front of that wall, I'm going to do a couple other things. I'm going to do a cube. And so this one will be at 4 feet, 4 feet, and it'll be 4 feet tall. There we go. I will do a sphere. So again, these are all standard primitives. Let me do the sphere here. And we'll do that at a diameter of 4 feet, so it's about the same size. I'm also going to have to move this vertical so that it sits up above the ground just a little bit. There's a sphere, and I asked for a cone and a pyramid. So we'll do a cone. Did I ask for a cylinder? I should ask for a cylinder. I say circle. That's a mistake. It should say cylinder. There's a cylinder. And we'll do one more as a pyramid here. Number of sides is going to be 4. Like that. So these shapes, the logic of these shapes doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what they look like. These are just different types of shapes that I'm going to apply textures to. So the other thing I need to do is I'm going to go into shaded mode so that I can start to see this in shaded mode. And I'm also going to add a V-Ray infinite plane underneath. I don't have the toolbars currently loaded, so I need to load those toolbars. I'll go to Tools, Toolbar Layout, and I'll go to File and Open. And on my flash drive, I have the V-Ray toolbars saved. I thought I did. There it is. Perfect. And that'll allow me to add the V-Ray infinite plane right here. It's also Viz infinite plane if you want to look at it that way. So now I have the V-Ray infinite plane, which is going to help me to see how this rendering is going to work. And so when I do this, I want to pick a material that has a very distinct pattern and repetition. So bricks or wood planks or something along those lines, because it's going to be easiest to see what's happening with this texture mapping. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my V-Ray material editor. So I'll click on the M, the yellow M, and I'm going to right-click on Seam Materials and go to Load Material. And I'll pick in my flash drive here. Here's my V-Ray materials. I'm going to do brick. I usually do wood planks. I'm going to do brick just so it's different because I'm tired of looking at the wood planks. So we'll pick brick. I'm going to do the new clean ones. And so we can take a quick look at them, and there they are. I need to apply this material to these objects. So I can select all the objects, for example, and go back to my material editor, right click, and say apply material to selection. I could also put them all on a layer. I'm only going to see the rendering when I actually do the rendering, or if I switch from the shaded mode over into the rendered mode. So I'm going to do that right now. Switch from shaded to rendered so that I can actually see what the objects look like. This is not, however, accurate to what the final rendering is going to look like. It's an approximation. So it's going to help us get to the bulk of what we need, but it's not really a true rendering. So at this point, I'm going to concentrate to start on just the back wall. So let me take these other objects. I'm holding Shift to select them all. And then I'm going to type hide, which is just make those objects temporarily go away. I could also type show, or I could put them on their separate layers, either way. Show unhides the objects. I'm going to go ahead and hide them again. And now we'll take a look at this brick wall. So let me select it. I'll type Z for zoom and S for selected so we can kind of take a look at it here. And as I orbit around the object, okay, we see that, yeah, the bricks are kind of stretched across the front. They're stretched across the top, and they don't show much on the side. So I need to deal with how the texture is applied to this object. Let me also make this V-Ray infinite plane on its own layer and then lock it so that I don't accidentally select it. There we go. All right, so now we need to control how the material is applied to this particular object. I'm going to do that by selecting the object, going to my properties, and we have a couple different options. First is just the object properties themselves. Then we go to the material properties of the object. And last is something called texture mapping. That's the one that we're going to go to. So I'll click on texture mapping. And there's not a whole lot here other than some buttons to start. That means there hasn't been a texture map applied to it. So this is just the default mapping. So this object most closely resembles a box. So using one of the standard box mapping is going to be a fairly good place to start. So when we look at an object, the first thing we want to see is, what does this object look most like? And in the case of a box, that's a good thing. It's really easy to work with. Texture mapping a box is easy. Sometimes objects don't play nice, and they don't really look like any one of these, in which case we have to kind of adapt. So we'll get to that a little bit later on. For right now, this looks an awful lot like a box. So I'll go ahead, and click on the Apply Box Mapping. Now when I click on the button, nothing happens. Look up at your command line. It asks me for the first corner of the base, or I can just pick a bounding box. Usually picking a bounding box is a great strategy. So I'll go ahead and click on bounding box. Then it's going to ask me, what coordinate system do I want to work in? We'll use the world coordinate system, X, Y, and Z. And do I want the texture map to be capped? Do I want there to be a top on this wall? In this case, yes, I do. So I'll choose yes. And when I do that, it looks marginally better, but not that much better. If I look at it, though, we can see that the front looks a little bit different than the side, where they're all squished, which looks different than the top. So I still need to make some adjustments. With the object selected, if I'm over in the texture mapping window, you see that I have a lot more than just the buttons. I have a bunch of options down below here as well. So as we go down here, I'm going to skip through the first options just a little bit, and I'm going to go to this X, Y, Z size. So this is how does the texture apply in X, Y, and Z. So the first one is you notice 144, 12, and 96. Those are in inches. My wall was 12 feet long, 144 inches, 12 feet or 1 foot thick, 12 inches, and 96. So what it's doing is it's applying the same number of repetitions of this pattern to all the sides, even though they're different. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and choose X equals Y equals Z. There's a button for X equals Y equals Z. If I click that, it will equalize, it will average and equalize all three of those values. And as soon as I do that, if I look at the front, it looks pretty reasonable. If I look at the side, yeah, it looks pretty reasonable. And if I look at the top, it looks pretty reasonable. So just by clicking that X equals Y equals Z right there, we have a reasonable texture mapping of our object. We can get more specific if we want. If we click 1, 1, and 1, the texture is going to get really small because it's going to repeat my image that makes up this texture every 1 inch. So I don't want that. So at 84, it was pretty accurate. That means my image is going to repeat every 84 inches. And there we go. So I'm reasonably happy with that. That seems good. If I wanted more repetition, I could change these values. But I can also come down here in the UVW repeat, and I can choose how many times the image repeats. So in this case, under UVW repeat, I'm going to check the lock button so that I only have to change one of the numbers instead of all 3 at the same time. I could change from 1 to 2. I'd get double the number of bricks in the same amount of space. If I did from 2, if I went back to 0.5, I get half the number of bricks. So I can control how many patterns is happening. It's not an accurate, this is a, it's like a percentage. So when I put it to 2, I'm doubling the number of bricks. It's not an accurate way of saying, make sure I have 12 bricks. It's a way of saying, I want the texture to be a little bit more dense. And the truth is that with a lot of V-Ray and a lot of rendering, it's what looks right. So you don't have to go in and measure every individual brick and make sure it's the right size and whatever. You just have to make sure it looks right. And as long as it looks like it's in the right scale, it's going to be in the right scale. So it doesn't have to be too technical. So in this case, I'm going to go back to the 1.0 like that. So that looks pretty reasonable. If I took this object and I went ahead and rendered it, we could see that it'll turn out and look reasonable. Yeah, you had a question?
So assuming like it also depends on the context it's in, like this size will depend on how much of a wall it is?
Right, how big the wall is. So there's a lot of variables that go into materials, and this is why it's not a perfect science. So we can look at this brick, for example. This particular material, and we'll go into this a little bit more in depth in a couple class days, but this material is made up of an image file, and that image file has a certain number of bricks on it. And that image file then tiles and repeats itself a number of times across my object. If I wanted to be very accurate and say the brick is going to be 8 inches long, I'd have to know how many repetitions of that brick are in my image. So I'd have to measure. Then I'd have to go in and calculate out how many, what scale should this be in, how many repetitions. There's a lot of math involved. And the truth is that it's just too much. We don't need it. We just need it to look approximately correct. And for most of this, it's a matter of getting it to x equals y equals z for average, and then adjusting this UV repeat. So if this didn't quite look right, we needed a couple more bricks, go up by 1. So 1.1, just a little bit more dense. 1.2, just a little bit more dense. It doesn't take much to adjust just a bit. And so that can get us to where we have that nice looking brick wall. The key here is that it's being applied on all sides. The other thing is that this is wrapping around the corner. So the texture continues and then turns the corner for us. And that's how the box mapping is applied. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my next object. I'm going to show all my objects. I'm going to hide the wall and move on to just the cube. So we'll hide these guys too. And I'll move on to just the cube. So once again, if I select this object, I can go into my texture mapping and I can apply a box mapping. So there's a box map. I look up at my command line here. This bounding box will work just fine. World will work just fine. Yes, I want it to be capped. So there it is. It's showing me already x equals y equals z at 48. Because this happens to be a perfect cube, it's all sides are the same, which also means that the texture appears correctly on all 4 sides. In this case, it's a matter of adjusting the UVW repeat. There it is at 0.5. Oh, here, I didn't lock it, so this means I have to type it in for each value. And with that set, I can see that, all right, this wraps. This continues up, turns the corner, and goes along the top. This one turns the corner and goes along the side. But lo and behold, there's always going to be one side of the box that has a seam. So in this case, this side, this edge, the brick's going this way. The top edge, it's going that way. If I want to change how this is applied, I can make further adjustments. So I could select my object. I could come down here. Let's say that I wanted, instead of it wrapping there, I wanted this edge to end up over here. I can work with the UVW rotate values, and I could trial and error and put 90 in one of these and get it to rotate. For me, that's always a little bit hit or miss. You're just kind of guessing at it. Instead, there's something called show mapping. And so right up here, there's a little button for show mapping. And I'll do this multiple times today so you can see it. And when I click on show mapping, it gives me, instead of having the object highlighted in yellow, it gives me a box that represents the object. And it has these little dotted yellow lines in it. I can then manipulate this box just as I would any other object, but it's going to control how the material is applied. So this is one instance where I actually think the gumball is a valuable tool. I'm not a big fan of the gumball in general. Some of you will become huge fans of the gumball and you'll use it extensively. I don't like it that much. That's a personal preference. However, in this context, it's great. So let me turn on the gumball. It's a toggle switch right down at the center at the bottom. And it gives me this little red, blue, and green toggle. With that red, blue, and green, I can adjust the texture. So I can move, and you can see that the texture is moving. I can also rotate the texture using one of the rotates. So I can rotate the texture like this, and you can see that the texture changes as I rotate around my particular object. So I could even go as far as rotating it this way, and then rotating it up this way, and really changing how it was applied to a particular object. You can see that it continues up along that edge, and then turns the corner and keeps going on that angle. So this isn't necessarily how you want to manipulate it. This isn't perfect for a cube, but I like to show you that as a concept. Okay, I'll come back and revisit this. Let me undo that and get it back to where it's straight, and we'll move on. When I'm done, I'll select my object, and I'll click on the hide mapping, which makes that go away. And then we'll go ahead and show the rest of my objects. So I have this cube and this were well texture mapped. Let's go ahead and hide those, and we'll get just down to the sphere left here. So I'll hide these, and I have just the little sphere. Let me zoom selected so that I'm looking at it. And in this current state, essentially, as it gets closer and closer to the top of the sphere, it gets more and more squished. So let's go ahead and let's select it. Let's go over to our texture mapping. I'm not going to pick a box this time because this isn't a box, it's a sphere. I'll pick the sphere mapping. So there it is. We'll go ahead and do a bounding box, world, and now it has the texture mapping applied to it. Once again, it's already set at 48, 48, 48, so x equals y equals z is not necessary. I can control how many times it repeats, so this could be 1.2, for example, 1.2 and 1.2. Oops. I actually recommend always checking the lock, because then you only have to change it one time. And you can see how I can choose the number of repetitions. The other thing I can do is I can show the mapping. There it is again. I can use my gumball to edit this mapping such that the bricks are on edge, for example, rather than being on top. So it's just a different strategy for working with the sphere. All right, next thing I'm going to do, let me go to show, and we'll go ahead and hide. And we have just this object showing. So in this case, I bet you can tell where I'm going. There's a cylindrical mapping. I want to apply the cylindrical mapping to it. We can do a bounding box, world, and have it capped. And then we can control x equals y equals z. And we can control the repetition, probably closer to 2. And you can see it applied there. In this case, it applied the cap kind of funny. So I may end up exploding and reapplying the cap differently. So in that case, I might take this and explode, take the cap, delete the mapping, and then apply a new, we could just do a planar mapping from above. We'll do a bounding box, world, just U and V. There it is. So I can reapply. Question?
I kind of get, like, how do you do the mapping? Then
So you're going to select your object. You're going to, in the properties window, you're going to come over to texture mapping, and then you're going to pick the shape that most closely resembles your object, for the most part.
Right.
If you want to edit the mapping after the fact, you can select the object. You can go into your show mapping, which gives you this little show mapping widget, and you can then rotate or adjust your mapping as an object. This would allow me, for example, to rotate and have my texture being applied that way if I wanted to. That's not doing much for the edges, but you get the idea of what I'm trying to do. It wouldn't be good to do a cylindrical mapping on its side. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show my objects again. And now we get down to the more complicated objects. So we've already done the simple objects. Let me hide them. Oops. And we have the pyramid, and we have the cone. So in the case of the cone, I don't really have a map that would work. There's no preset object for this. So in this case, I have to think about, what do I want the cone to look like? Do I want the bricks to appear stacked around horizontally? Do I want them to run vertically like they are right now? What's my ultimate goal in this? And the truth is, we probably wouldn't have bricks on a cone anyway, but you get the idea here. So in the case of I want them to come around horizontally, well, actually the spherical would probably work reasonably well. So I could choose the spherical mapping with a bounding box, world. We don't have to cap it, and that can let this go around the sphere. They're getting a little bit wonky at the top, so that, again, that may or may not be a good strategy. If I applied one of the other texture maps to it, like, for example, a planar map, that would come down from above, and it would go straight down over the object like that, and it would stretch it as it comes down. So that could be a desired effect. It's going to change. If I did, let me go back and edit that mapping. If I didn't like the plane in that direction, I could adjust and have the plane apply in the horizontal direction, which would look great from this side, but not so much from this side. So you have to really think through it. If I did a box mapping on this, it would look okay dead on each side. So that side looks okay, that side looks okay, but in between the two, we'd end up with this seam where, as the projection happens, we're getting a seam because the box doesn't have a sharp corner. It's circular in this case. So we get some wonky results there. So you really have to kind of think through it. I'm going to show you, because it's a little bit easier to see, I'm going to show you a different strategy over here on the pyramid that you could elect to use on the cone if you wanted to. But I'm going to do it on the pyramid. So let me go ahead and hide this one, and I'll get to the last one. So this is the most technical strategy for dealing with your texture mapping. And when we do this kind of a mapping, it takes a lot more kind of finesse and time to get it right. So when in doubt, use one of the primitives. That's the easiest, fastest way of getting good texture mapping. When you get into really trying to render something perfect and you want to be custom about that mapping and whatever, you might get to this level. But again, it depends on the shape. So in this case, we're going to do the Unwrap mask or mapping. I'll go ahead and click on it. It's going to say to select the seams. So this is as if, you guys remember in 130 you had to build a little pyramid and cut it out of paper and glue it together? You had to construct that. You guys remember that a little bit? That's what Rhino is going to do. It's going to fold this open and let us adjust texture based on that. So I'm going to choose where I want the seams to be. So maybe I want a seam that goes along the bottom, like that, so it'll cut open. And I want a seam that runs up one of the sides, for example, like that. So I've come down the side and I've cut around those. As soon as I hit enter, it's going to apply that, but I'd like to see it. And that's where this button does, this UV editor button. I'll go ahead and click on that. It says first corner of rectangle. I'm just going to draw a big rectangle here. And when I do that rectangle, it's going to show me the unfolded shape. So this should look a little familiar to when you had to do it in 130. Yeah. Where's that? Sorry, I couldn't hear. It's this button right here. Okay? And so in this context, it's a little hard to see because I have my infinite plane on. Let me turn that infinite plane off, and there we go. Now we're seeing the texture, and we're seeing our object on it. It's not really showing me too much because I'm not seeing what the texture actually looks like. So when I open the UV editor over here, it allows me to either use the material or use a texture. I could use a grid, for example. There's a numbered grid, and I could come over and I could look at how that grid is applying on my object. So there's 54, 64, 44 right there. And let's find it over here. There it is. 44, 54, and 64. Let's say I wanted it to be straight. I could actually rotate my object. We could move this over. And then over here, we'd see there's that set of textures. So you see how I can really customize exactly what's happening. Sometimes this isn't enough and you want to see your actual texture here instead of the numbered grids. I can go find that texture, and I have to find it. I was using brick, so I'd have to go into my V-Ray materials. And again, this is not the kind of thing that you would do on an everyday occurrence. It's something that you're going to do only on very specific circumstances. So there's my actual brick texture. I've just applied it there. And now I can control how that's working. So I could rotate my object to have one face apply in a certain direction. I could also move to control how and where on the texture. You can, by the way, move this so that it's off. It's as if this texture keeps repeating. So once you have it set, you can come over here and say, oh, there's that side. It's applied perfectly. I'm really happy with it. That's the side I'm going to render. And ultimately, you can render it. So this is a very, very specific way of dealing with applying a texture to an object. Not necessary to do it this way, but you can do it this way. And so I at least want to introduce that as a concept and as an idea. OK, so this first bit was about exploring texture mapping and getting you practice with texture mapping. For today's purposes, I know on the handout I talk about doing a render and showing me the render. I'm not overly worried about that because we have lots of other things to post. So we can skip over that part. What I want you to do is I want you to I want you to go ahead and open up that bridge file that we did in exercise 205. So we'll open, and let me find it here. There's my bridge. And it turns out that this one I already embellished a little bit. So let me open the one that I haven't embellished. Hold on a second. OK, so here was the one that I was working on. What I want to do in order to ultimately use this file, we're going to bring it in as a block reference. I'm going to apply the material, and I'm also going to clean up the file quite a bit. So let's go ahead and delete things like the environment. So let me come over here, and it looks like I haven't even separated out layers. I'm going to delete the directional light. I'm going to try to delete the infinite plane. I'm going to delete one of my two objects. I'll take this bridge object, and I'm going to move it so that that corner right there, let me turn on my object snap with my endpoint. That corner right there is at 0, 0, 0. And I'm also going to rename the default layer to be bridge. and I'm going to delete the rest of these layers because they don't have anything on them. So we'll get rid of those layers. So all I have is a layer called bridge. None of the rest of the stuff exists anymore. And I need to go ahead and apply a material to this. I also want to make sure that I apply a texture map to this. So I'm going to go ahead and work on applying my material. So first off, I'll open up the V-Ray material editor. And I need to load some concrete material. So let me right-click and say Load Material. I'll go to my flash drive, into my V-Ray folder. I'll go to Concrete, and I'm gonna do the board form finish, but I could pick any one of these. I'll go ahead and say Open. There it is. And there's my rough board form. I'm going to right-click and say Apply Material to Layer, and it's going to apply to the bridge layer. Now that I've done that, if I switch from shaded mode into rendered mode, we're going to see that my material was supposed to apply. It looks like I had already applied a material to this to the object itself. So let's select the objects, and let's say Assign Material. This is again in the material part of the properties. I'm going to say Assign by Layer. So that I'm back to being assigned by layer, and there it is. There's my rough board form. You see that as I do that, though, all of these individual objects are texture mapped differently. So I have this one coming down vertical. I've got this one different on the floor. Like, there's issues. So I need to make sure that I do the texture mapping. So I'm going to do this on purpose, not as a whole object. The truth is that you're ultimately going to do the texture mapping on the whole object at once. It makes it a lot easier. But I want to show you how this process works. So I'll pick just this object, and I'll go over to the texture mapping. And this is roughly box-like. So I'll use a box. And we'll say, yes, we want it to be bounding box, world, and cap it. So now there's no, you can't even tell the seam where this transitions into that, because it flows seamlessly through. That's the idea. So it doesn't matter that there's a change in your plane right there. So with that selected, let me also do x equals y equals z to make sure it's even on all parts. There we go. Likewise, if I wanted the texture to continue flowing around here, I would go in, show my mapping widget, turn on my gumball, and rotate it by 90 degrees. You hold down Shift so that it jumps, and there it is. That's going to allow this to flow down and underneath correctly. So I spent all this time and work, and I got that texture mapped correctly, but I missed these other objects. And this is where I said you could just do it all at once by selecting them, and I would do that typically. The good news about texture mapping is you can copy your mapping from one object to another object. Let me go ahead and hide the mapping widget there. There it is, hide the mapping widget. Good. And so I can change the texture mapping on another object. So let's take this object, and there's this little brush tool that says Match Mapping. I can select it, and it says Select Source Object. Well, I could select that as my source object, and now the texture is going to match up. So let me continue on. I'll select this top, this piece here, this piece here, and I'll go over to Match My Mapping, and I'll match it to the outside. And so now the scale works all the way along. There it is. There's probably a few other pieces that haven't been applied just yet. I'll select all, except for the outside piece, which is the mapping that I like. We'll say Match Mapping to that outside piece, and now everything has that mapping applied to it. And so as we look at it, we can see that, yeah, this is looking pretty good. The nice thing here is now I could select all of my objects, and I could go over into the UVW repeat and say, you know, I'd really like it to be a little bit denser. I could say maybe at 1.5 and get a few more repetitions there. OK, so I've gone ahead and I've made that correction. I'll go ahead and save this file. So I'll go to File and then Save. This one's ready to use as a block. I've cleaned it up. If you want, you can also get rid of these extra little lines. They're not necessary. I can do that by selecting typing SEL and then polyline, which is going to select all the polylines that I drew, and then I can press delete and make those go away. It doesn't matter. They can come through. They won't show up in the rendering long term. There's probably a few other individual lines. I could do SEL line And make sure there's a couple lines. Those can go away too. All right, so that's done. I'll save it one more time. That's good. I'm going to go back. I will leave this one open. I'm going to go back to my spider that I did earlier today. I realized when I was helping you guys that I made a slight mistake. This piece of glass should line up with the center right here, not down at this corner. So I'm going to go ahead and move that. It's going to be 6 inches over, and it's going to be 6 inches up. Type V for vertical, and we're going to go up by 6 inches. And there you go. That's where it should have been. Let me take the whole thing and move that glass corner down to 0, 0. 0, 0, 0. Like that. So again, that was a mistake. I already have my layers set up here. I have a curtain wall. I have glass and clamp. Let's take glass and clamp and make them sublayers of the curtain wall. And let's go ahead and delete layer 3 to 5. Those are gone. So now this one's nice and clean. This one already has materials applied. I'm not, because this is glass and because this is metal, I'm not overly worried about texture mapping them. They're going to turn out just fine. So we'll go ahead and I'll save this one. So I'll go to File and then Save. Now it's time to bring those into a scene that we can actually work with. So I decided that it would be easier if you had a sample file that had like a sun in it and some good settings already set up for you. I did that last year for exercise 208. I copied that same file into exercise 207. So if you go to the course website under today's exercise 207, at the very bottom, there's an exercise 208 base file for rendering. Don't be confused that it says exercise 208. We're going to use it in 208, but you can also choose to use it in 207. If you download that file, it will download. And when you open it, I've gone ahead and I've already set up some of the V-Ray stuff for you. So that's the good news. So if you were to do a rendering right now, you'd see that it has a white infinite plane, but it also has some sky to reflect, which will help with the glass part. So you're more than welcome to use this to set up this file. So at this point, we're going to bring in those two objects that we created, the bridge object and the glass object. So I'll go into File, and I'm going to go to, Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And we're going to do this many, many times in the semester. But I'm going to insert the block instance. I need to go find the file. So I'm going to click on the little file icon and go find it. And was this? Sorry, I think I saved it in here. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Now, the Insert File Options box comes up. And this is really important. And people have a tendency to skip over this and just say OK, but I want to explain a few things. So when we bring in this file, there are 3 different ways of bringing in the block definition. One is to just stick it in there as if we copied and pasted it in the first place. That's fine. We won't ever lose the file and have missing links. But it also makes our files really large in size. Long term. This file doesn't matter, but imagine the file at the end, or you're in the 221 skyscraper studio and you decide to throw some windows in, and suddenly you have 2,000 windows. Having them linked as references is a lot better than having them embedded in your Rhino file. So these blocks are really going to make a big difference. So we can also embed them and link them. The link allows us to make reference changes and updates to our work afterward, or we can just link them. I'm a big fan of just linking them. The key here is that you can't lose the file that you're bringing in. So in this case, the bridge, I can't delete it. I have to make sure it's there. And I also have to pay attention to where it is on my flash drive and what drive letter it is, because these are Windows computers and they mandate a drive letter. So in my case, I always plug my little hard drive into the same USB port every time I start it up. So theoretically, every time it's going to be the same drive letter. If not, you can go back and relink it if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and do link. Below that, we have something called layer style. Is it going to be an active layer or a reference layer? I prefer reference layer, so I prefer link and reference layer. the reference layer will show up in your layer stack as kind of a grayed out layer. And it makes it very clear what is embedded and what is not embedded. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it as reference. I'll say OK. And then you can see the object. And I just need to click and place it into the scene somewhere. So there it is. I need to move it up a little bit. So we'll do move V for vertical. And we'll go up, I don't know, 10 feet. There it is. So every time I click on it, I can't actually select any of the individual pieces of it. It's just going to select the whole object. But I can copy and paste it. So let me copy it. Let me turn on my object snap. And we'll go from right there. And we can paste it right there, etc. So I can make this bridge out of all these little pieces. Once I have one set, right, I could take all of those and I could copy those. To make a longer and longer bridge. You guys get the idea. The nice thing about this is V-Ray brought in all of the materials for me. So I already applied the material. I already applied the texture mapping. All is good. I can go ahead and just render this out. I'm not going to yet because I'm going to bring in the glass too. So I have that first one in. Next thing I'll do is the same thing. I'll go up to Edit, Blocks, Insert Block Instance. And I'll bring in that glass that I used. So there was my curtain wall. This was the one from today. I'll say OK. Link and reference. I'll say OK. And there it is. So I need to do some rotations on it because it's obviously not in the correct direction. Let me rotate it. I'm just doing a regular rotate. So it's going in that direction. Let me move this. I'm going to do this in the top view so it's a little bit easier to see. Let me move this over so that it's kind of close to my bridge. There it is. Now, I could copy and paste this the same way that I did the bridge. But if you imagine copying and pasting, 5 stories worth, it's going to get a little daunting. So I'm going to use the array command instead. So I'll go ahead and type array. And it's going to ask me for the number in the x direction. So the number in the x direction, if I look at my little coordinate system here, is only 1. I only want 1 in the x direction. So I'll hit enter. Number in the y direction, oh, I don't know. Let's do 20. Number in the z direction, 10. Then it's going to say y spacing or first reference point. I'm going to come down here and snap right to the edge of the glass. Actually, I'll do it at the top because it's a little easier to grab. There we go. And I'll pull this out, and you can see as I do it, it's creating a whole array of these. So I'll snap to the, I'll snap to the edge right there. Z spacing, our first reference point, will go up in the z direction. I'll go from there up to right there. A lot easier than copying and pasting that many times, right? So at this point, it's still asking, did I want to change anything? Or is my spacing still OK? All this looks OK. Enter to accept. That's when you actually create all the objects. So there they are. I can set up a little rendering for myself. Looks like I have a few too many tall. I can get rid of a few of these. Take this one, zoom selected. So I'm seeing behind the objects. We'll zoom out just a little bit. And it's ready for the render. At this point, I can go ahead and do the render. I could also switch from perspective into rendered mode, and I could see that, yep, everything turned out the way I thought it was going to. I'm happy. That's a good thing. Now, let's say that I wanted to make an adjustment to one of these. I wasn't quite happy with the way my bridge looked. I wanted to make a change to it. This is the advantage. I can go back to my bridge file, which I left open, I thought. There it is. And I can say, you know what? I really want the bridge to have a hole that goes through it. I don't know why, but we'll say I do. Let me take the cylinder tool and make a cylinder. Let me rotate that. This is where the gumball drives me nuts. I can't keep it there. Rotate 3D. There. Move vertical. There, it's going through. I'm going to do a Boolean operation to subtract. So there's my Boolean subtract. Select surfaces and polysurfaces to subtract from. There we go. I'll select those. There's my subtract with would be this one. Enter. And it did a brilliantly terrible job. Looks like it added them instead of subtracted them. Hold on a second. Let me join these together first. Okay, let's try that one more time. Boolean subtract. There. With this one. Oh, come on. It keeps adding it instead of subtracting it. Maybe I did it backwards. Subtract from, it should be this one. Subtract with that one. I don't know. It doesn't like me today. But let's say we wanted this instead. Such as like. What? We could trim it. That would be fine. And at this point, that's probably what I should do. I should be able to use the Boolean operations. Anyway, it doesn't matter for what I'm trying to do. This is ugly regardless of what I decide to do. But when I save it, and I go back to that file that had the bridges in it in the first place, this one, I can go into my Edit menu and then go to Blocks and go to Block Manager. And it'll show that the bridge file, the linked file, is newer. At that point, I can click on Update. And I always say replace the materials, just in case I made a materials change. The block updates, and now all my bridges have that piece in it. So the advantage of using the block is you can make a change once and have it populate through the rest of your model. Okay? So at this point, I've gotten all of this in. I'll go ahead and do a rendering of this. I can post that rendering as my exercise 207. I'm fine if you just post that as your exercise 207. Okay? So a lot of you have pieces or whatever. If you would rather post some of the pieces or you didn't quite make it all the way to this point, post whatever you have. Just give me some kind of a post for 207, and you'll get credit for it. Does that make sense? I know it was a lot to take in. You have about 40 minutes left in class, 45 minutes, which is about what I predicted you'd have. So time to work on texture mapping and understanding how that part works. I should also mention, before I let you go, that you could go back and change the material here, and that would repopulate as well. So if I didn't like this concrete, I could go back into my V-Ray material editor, and I could say, you know what, I really like this concrete better. Let me apply that to my layer. Okay, there's the other concrete. When I save this, I can go back to my bridge file here. If I go to Edit, Blocks, Block Manager, it's going to show me that that's newer again. I can go ahead and click on Update. And you can see that it already updated the material. So it was able to do that. So you can work on materials in a block file and bring them in as an update later on. OK, so I'll let you guys go. I apologize for the double up today. I didn't like to doing that, but it is what it is. Next class, we'll continue on with both texture mapping and with building your own objects. So we'll keep working our way forward. Are there any questions that are not like individual questions? Yeah. Yeah. So if you need a little extra time, take the extra time. If you were here and you worked the whole time and you didn't quite finish and you post something, I will still give you credit for 207 because I know it was a bit long. I didn't have as much time as I like to have for you guys to make sure you get through everything. So it's not something where you're required to do it as homework. Obviously, learning the skills is the most important thing. So if it takes you a little bit longer to use the skills, take the time to make sure you're really comfortable with those skills. Make sure it's posted kind of by the next class would be fine. But if you want to just post however far you got today, that's OK with me too. Yeah?
Where was the layout 208? Is it on the download?
If you go to the exercise 207 page, so right here, if I went to exercises and I went to, where are we, fall of 2018, 207, at the very, very bottom, you'll see the 208 base file for rendering. That just helps not have to set up things. So you have something decent, and you can do your renderings from there. Okay? Any other questions? No? I'll come around and I'll help you guys.